Hey guys, this is Ed from Mission Ed Possible. Welcome to episode 2 of my Atari 8-bit assembly language tutorial series. Today we're going to be setting up the display list and I'm going to show you all about that. Let's get into it. Okay, so last time we got our Hello World program working and we got that right here. I made a couple of minor changes, but nothing major. And so today we're going to look at changing the graphics mode and I'm going to go into what all is entailed with that. So first thing to keep in mind here is that we are using the default display list. Okay, a display list is something where on the Atari 8-bit, it says what mode each line is going to be in. So the screen is divided up into several lines and it forms a list. We're going to take a look at the character or the graphic modes on the Atari 8-bit. So here's a good table here that shows the different modes we have. So we have basic mode, antic mode, number of colors, resolution, and all that stuff. What we care about here is the second column. And so we have antic mode 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, yada, yada. And if we look here, we can get into different modes that have different colors in them. So the graphics mode 2 here, the antic mode 2, has 2 colors and it has a resolution of 40 by 24. And you can see how many skylines and how much memory it takes and all that for each of these lines. Here are some examples showing the different modes. So we have Antic Mode 2, which is our standard text mode that we did. It's only 2 colors. Antic Mode 6, Antic Mode 7. This one right here, Antic Mode 4, I think actually that this is a typo, to be honest. Where it says Antic Mode 4 and Antic Mode 4. I believe that this should be saying Antic Mode 5 because it's 40 by 12. So this is the mode we're going to be using. And I'm going to show you how to do that. What we have to do here is we have to create what's called a display list. A display list is how the Atari knows what lines should be what. The cool thing is on the Atari, one of the things that's not showing here is how you can mix modes. So you could actually have one line of Antic Mode 6, another line of Antic Mode 7, a line of Antic Mode 2, 5, 4, whatever you want to do, you can mix and match. So what we might end up wanting for the game that we're building, we may want to mix the modes in that we may want to have some very small text and we can use Antic Mode 2 like for a status line. We use Antic Mode 5 for the graphics, and then maybe 6 or 7 to be able to put some text on the screen. Don't know. We'll have to figure that out as we go. So the great thing is we can mix and match. So what we need to do is we need to create a display list that's going to have all of our graphics modes listed. And by default, the graphics mode is 2 for all of the lines. And so we can actually build a display list that will do that so that we can say, okay, this is our starting point. We're just going to have graphics mode 2, antic mode 2 throughout our page. So in order to do that, we need to create a display list. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go down here and I'm going to add our display list. And I can't type. Okay. So we are going to create a display list. So I'm going to call it dlist. Okay. And it's just going to have data just like our other stuff. Something to keep in mind is in order to do this display list, we are sending basically a set of instructions to the Antic chip. It's a special chip in the Atari 8-bit and it's unique to the Atari that handles the display list stuff. And so we're going to be basically creating a program of sorts that we're going to be sending to the Antic chip. The next thing to keep in mind here is the fact that the Atari computer is meant originally to be displayed on a TV. And something you may or may not know is that a TV actually has more screen space than what you can see. And so what they call that extra space around the edge, and if you look at a tube, there's some areas that you can't see, and that's called the overscan area. And so what we need to do here is we need to create some blank space at the top and the bottom to handle overscan. So the first thing we need is to do 8 blank lines, okay? And we actually, there's actually 24 blank lines, I should say. And so what we have here is there's in the antic, in order to send a blank line, we actually use a hex of 70. So a hex value of 70. So I'm actually going to create some equates here at the top. And so these are going to be kind of our variables that we can use. And I'm going to call this one blank 8. So for 8 blank lines, okay? And it uses hex 70. So what we're going to do is we're going to say 8 blank lines. And so we have blank 8 equals 8 blank lines. There's not one to save 24 blank lines. That's okay. What we can do is we can do 3 of them. So we're going to say blank 8, comma blank 8, blank 8. So we have 24 blank lines. That's going to handle our overscan. Okay, I need to put byte in there to tell it they're bytes. And so the next thing we need to do is we need to know what mode we're going to be using. And we already looked up that we're using Antic Mode 2 to start with, okay? So Antic Mode 2, we can put right here is we can say Antic 2. And so that's actually just going to be equal to the number 2. Antic Mode 2. Let's just do some spacing here. And so what we do here is we're going to say we're going to be using Antic Mode 2. So I'm just going to say Antic 2. Now, the issue here is that we also need to send a command to the display list. The very first thing that we need to send here is what's called a load memory scan. So it's actually usually called LMS, and that is hex of 40. And so I'm just going to put load memory scan. The very first one we send needs to have this LMS in it as well. So it's a little confusing, but we actually need to add LMS to our Antic mode. So the very first one is going to be a 42. So we have the number 2 for Antic mode 2. We could, you could do $, it doesn't really matter, but Antic mode 2 right here. And we're going to say plus the LMS, which means this load memory scan. Okay. And the next thing we need to know is where our screen memory is located. Okay. Now, one of the things that we haven't messed with here is the actual location of the screen memory. We know where it is here, where this screen memory address is pointing to, but we don't actually know what it is. And we're actually going to set an area that we're going to start writing to. And so I'm going to create a new variable called screen. And I'm going to put it at hex of 4000. Okay, so this is going to be our screen buffer. Okay, so this is where we're going to be writing to for all of our screen stuff. Now, what we need to do is we need to tell the Antic where this is located. And the way we do that is we put it right here, and I'm going to use a special symbol here so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to use a special couple symbols here, but the idea here is that we have screen and we have screen, and we're using a less than sign and a greater than sign. And what that means is that we're using a 16-bit number. And in order to send this data, you actually have to send it in reverse, okay? So what this is going to send is, so this right here is what's called a left shift operator. And we can say left shift of, right here. So it's going to actually show this byte first, then this byte. So it's going to send a 00, then it's going to send a 04. Okay. So it just has to send it in reverse. And we could get into why that is, but for now, it's, just trust me that we have to do it this way. So we're sending in 4000 to the Antic to be able to say that this is where we're going to be putting our screen memory. Okay. The next thing to do is to be able to say the rest of the lines in our display list. We have to say what mode we're going to want for these lines. So we're just going to say, for now, we're just going to say antic 2 for the rest of the time. Now, one of the things that we can do is we can calculate how many of these antic 2s we need by looking here and seeing how many scan lines per mode line we have here. And we have a certain amount of lines that we can do. But the idea here is that we're going to have 24 lines of mode 2. So I'm going to actually have to, I'm just going to put 6 of them on a line. And then I'm going to copy and paste these. Okay. Now this isn't going to be exactly where we're going to want it the whole time, but for now, that's what we need. And one of the last things we need to do is we need to say, there's a thing called jump while vertical blank. So there's when we end our display list, we have to tell it where to jump. Okay. So we talked about jumps last time, where we're going to jump to a certain address. So we're going to jump to, it's called a jump while vertical blank. This is one of the things that the antic needs. So I'm just going to put a comment here. And we need to send the JVB to the antic. And we need to tell it what address our display list is at. So basically what we're doing is we're creating a endless loop. Okay. So we're going to say where the D list is at by saying like this. We're going to use the same trick to say that we've got D list. We have to do the same thing that we did before when we did the screen, and say this is, it's at an address that is a 16-bit address for this D list. We don't know what it is, but we don't care. Whatever the assembler is going to replace this D list with whatever this ends up being in our program. And so basically what we're doing is we're creating an endless loop for the display list. So we've created the display list now. Now we need to tell the program that we're going to use it. We need to tell the processor that, hey, we're going to use this display list. So to do that, we're going to do a couple commands at the beginning of our program. Before we do that, we need one more address to do this. So we're going to see, it's called SDL-STL, which is our starting address for our display list. Okay, so we're going to set this up. It's at 0230, and I'm going to say display list starting address. And we're going to put the address of our display list into this address here, this 0230. And the way we do that is we're going to load in the address of our, at least the first byte of our address for our display list. And we're going to store it into SDL-STL. And now we're going to do the other one. So we can say the other byte in here, and we can store into SDL-STL +1. So what that does is it says, here's our display list. Here's the location of our display list. Now what we're going to do is we're going to stick the byte, it's kind of like what we have right here, but we don't know what the display list address is right now. We're going to stick the first byte into this SDL-STL right here, this 0230. And we're going to stick the second byte into 0231. So because it's a 16-bit address, we need to use 2 bytes to be able to store that. Okay, so we have this LDA STA stuff in here so that it's just putting that in there. And so now this loads in our display list. So I'm just going to put a comment, load display list. And here's our main program. So I'm going to just put main loop, say. So here's our what we do in our normal program, but we want to do this to like initialize it. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and compile that. Okay. So it didn't like that. Oh, What did I do wrong? I think it did not like the pound sign. Why did it not like the pounds? Oh, I think when you're dealing with equates, it can't deal with a memory location. It's just a values. So that's fine. So I'm going to just fix these up a little bit and go ahead and compile it. It's not like it changed. So it's compiled. And now what I want to do is I want to run it. So I'm going to use Altera and we're going to change it to main.obx. We're using the same one. We see what happens here. We have text on here, or we have the blue screen, the same thing, but we're missing some. Okay. It's probable that I didn't put enough. Yeah, we're supposed to have 24 lines and I did not do 24 lines. So I actually need to copy and paste this. Now the first one is right here. So we don't want to put that one, but so this now should fill up the whole screen. There we go. Okay. So we've changed our display list. And the deal is that we are writing to this location. We're still writing to this other screen location. And we have told the display list that our screen location is actually in 4000. Okay. Or 400, I guess. Actually, I typed that wrong. It's supposed to be 4000. So we want our screen buffer to be 4000. And we're writing to the old screen location, this screen memory location. So what we actually want to do is we don't want to actually write to screen instead. Okay. So now we can run this or compile it, then run it. And now we have our Hello Atari back. So we are writing to the correct location now. And so we're telling the display list, this is where we're going to be reading. This is going to be our screen buffer. Okay. So all we've done is replicated what comes by default. And so that's okay, but we're going to be changing some things. The first thing I want to do is I want to try some of these other modes. So we have all of these modes that we can use, and let's stick to the text modes because we're dealing with text right now. We have 3, 6, 7, 4, and 5 that we can deal with. So let's see if we change things to use. Let's say the first line, let's change to Antic Mode 3. And so we can just put a comment. I mean, we're not going to be using these all the time, but I'm just going to go ahead and make variables for these. So we have our Antic modes right here. It looks all right. And now what we can do is we can say, hey, let's try Antic Mode 3. See what that looks like. And that's going to be for just our first line. Okay. Okay, so that didn't change anything. Let's try Antic Mode. Let's try Antic Mode 4. Okay. Notice we have something different now. So it looks like the same size, but it looks funky, right? It's in color. So that's kind of interesting. Let's try Antic Mode 5. So notice it looks very similar. It's just taller. And one of the things to keep in mind is the fact that these are square pixels versus Antic Mode 4, they're rectangular. Okay, let's take a look at Antic Mode 6. See what that looks like. Okay, so that's the text mode where you can see it again. It's in one color. And let's change it to Antic Mode 7. Much bigger. And you can mix and match so that, like, let's say we wanted to have Antic Mode 2 or 7 at the top, and then Antic Mode 2 for 6 lines, and then let's do an Antic Mode 4, and then a 6, and then a 7, whatever you want, right? And so if we compile this, you'll see that we have several different modes in here. So I don't have text going through all of them, so you can't totally see them, but Trust me, they're there. So the mode that we're wanting to work with in this tutorial is going to be Antic Mode 5. And the reason why is because it's color. So it has 5 colors and it has the square pixels, as I said. So we wanted to change all of these modes to be Antic Mode 5. So I'm just going to go ahead and change these. Now, something to keep in mind is Antic Mode 5 only uses 12 lines. Because if you look right here at Antic Mode 5, it's a 40 column by 12 row display. So we only need 12 of these Antic 5s. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of these and I'm going to copy and paste this. And so we've got 6, 12, we only need 12. So right here, because we have the first one there. So now what we have is a screen of Antic Mode 5. Now, right now, it's hard to see because it's, and we'll get into why that is, but it is, the idea here is that it does have multiple colors. And what we're going to be doing with this tutorial series is we're going to be using the characters here, and we're going to be changing the look of the characters to turn them into sprites. And the great thing about that is that we can make it so that we have text that looks like text in our code, and we can do things with it, but on the screen it'll look like a wall or a floor or whatever we want, a door, you know, all these different things that we can do, and to actually make it look like a game and not just text. And oh yeah, we'll be able to do 5 colors with it. And 5 is actually a little bit of a misnomer. It's actually 4. There's a 5th bonus color, and we'll get into why that is probably in the next video. Okay, so I think that's about it for this episode. I showed you how to set up a display list. We now have a whole screen full of Mode 5. Next time, we're going to change the font so we can show different tiles on the screen, and we can build a scene. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the like button. And if you'd like to see more of this series or any of my other series, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. I post new videos every week. Until next time, see you in the next adventure. Take care.